Perfect. Welcome, welcome. And selling is about solving problems, but closing is about certainty. The more certain you are, the more people will trust you, no matter their personality type. So it's my pleasure today to discuss personality in the close. So, Nancy,
Yes,
how are you today?
I am fabulous. And so you just said something very important about closing. And closing is our topic for today, how to
Yes.
close, but specifically how to look at closing from the vantage point of personality styles. A lot of sales systems teach closing in a way that is very systematic. You lay out the issue, you collect data points about the pain, you massage a little bit, you paint the
Mhm.
bright world of the future, you then make a presentation and ask for the sale, handle objections, and go on to onboard a client. But you and I know it doesn't go that smoothly, does it?
No, it doesn't. Very,
So
very rarely.
very, very rarely. Yeah. And so why don't you go ahead, Gary, and give some of your credentials and background so people know who it is that is talking to us.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you again, Nancy, for having me on. I really appreciate being able to collaborate and discuss this really important topic and something a lot of people, I think, lack some clarity around. So, a little background myself as to why I'm here, why you're bothering to listen to us have this conversation is I am a 10X business coach. So, I'm a Grant Cardone licensee, I'm a Grant Cardone elite coach. And what that means is not only do I have my own coaching business, but I actually deliver coaching services on behalf of Grant Cardone. So if you're familiar with Grant and 10X, you'll see that kind of everywhere through my background. And then, of course, Micu Growth is my personal brand. And actually, just in 2024, was recognized as the #2 coach for all of the Grant Cardone elite coaches. So #2, yes. And that is extraordinarily exclusive. So I'm very privileged and honored, really, to have achieved that milestone. So that's a little bit of the sales experience and why I might just have a little bit of an insight here today.
No, that's fantastic. So number two, two fingers up for two.
Yes,
Second in Grant Cardone's coaching system, but also it's V for victory because that's
absolutely.
what we're talking about, right? We're talking about closing sales. And I know that you use a particular personality system, and I'm going to ask you to describe that. And then I'm going to go on and talk about the system that I use, and we're going to talk about the differences and
Right.
similarities. So go for it, Gary.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we typically use when we're talking to a prospect or talking to, in particular, a mentee, is getting an idea of what is their behavioral assessment, particularly using the DISC method. So many people are familiar with DISC. For just a really, really brief overview, you've got your high D's, high I's, high S, high C. Most people are a combination, and your perfect manager is somewhere in the middle. So what we essentially get clued in on is, are they fast-paced and outspoken? Are they accepting and warm? Are they cautious and reflective? Or are they questioning and skeptical? So for me, I tend to be middle C, high S, or I'm sorry, high C, middle S, middle I, and then somewhere in the middle on D. So kind of a managerial, but then that real high analytical. And that would probably not surprise you if you know that I'm a tax CPA as well. So that fits right into that box. But just as a great kind of overview assessment, it gives us how people interact, but it doesn't necessarily dive into so much or as deeply into the why they act certain ways. And I think, Nancy, that's where you stand out in your approach.
All right, so thank you very much for that. And interestingly enough, people, when you listen to the AlikeAbility system, which is, of course, what I'm going to discuss, you're going to find that there's a good overlap between DISC and AlikeAbility. And the reason for that, Gary, is because my colleague, Mary Peckus, who actually helped identify how long it takes people to make up their minds. She was very familiar with DISC and Performax. And so this was in her head as she was going ahead and creating, and not just creating, but researching the different buyer styles. So I'm going to explain the 4 styles. We give them numbers, and the numbers are based upon the number of contacts that a person needs, touch points, to make up their mind. And when Mary did her research, which is now about 45 years ago, it was primarily research based upon telemarketing or in-person sales conversations. And so these were her touch points. Now, today, of course, we have a big digital system. And so what I did is I took her results and I've now taken out and put them into the digital virtual market that exists today. And so the numbers of the buyers are 2, 4, 6, and 8. The number 2 buyer corresponds pretty similar to the D. They're fast decision makers. They're eager to get results. They want it off their plate, very competitive, want to win, and enjoy the finer things in life. The I in DISC, turns out that's the number 4 buyer. They take 2 or 3 touch points to make up their mind, but they need 1 additional touch point, hence 4, because they get cold feet after they said yes. They go back and they think it over and they wonder, did the person take advantage of me because I tend to be so trusting and gullible? And so hence they get cold feet. They need an additional touch point saying, wow, we're glad we're working together, within 24 hours of saying yes. Then we have the number 6 buyer, which corresponds to the S. And this is the person who is very methodical, wants a system, a process. They want things that are tried and true. And then finally, the number 8 buyer, I like to laugh when you put 8 on its side, it's the symbol for infinity, because this person, our C in DISC, they start with 8 and they may go forever. Why? Because they're doing lots of research, asking questions, and wanting to do their due diligence. So there it is in a nutshell, the AlikeAbility system.
Oh, awesome. And I think in particular that we can totally see that. And we talk about analysis paralysis. That's what it is, right? We get stuck in that indecision.
Yes, exactly. So let's now talk about how this all applies to closing, because obviously you, the listener, you're looking for the opportunity to, how do I adjust what I say and do based on someone's personality style in order to onboard a new client? Do you want to start with how you would apply DISC to the closing process?
Yeah, absolutely. So where it starts, I think first and foremost, especially from the 10X approach, is when we're selling, it's very emotional. As we transition to the close, once we've hit our 7 requirements for the sale, and we know that we're ready actually to move into the close, then it switches to be logical. And the reason for that change is people buy in, right, with emotional. They need to feel that it's right. They want to see that it's going to help them and solve their problem. They trust you. They trust the product. They trust that you're going to be around to service them, right? All those things come into place. But when it comes time to actually write the check and separate with cash, most people then, it becomes a logical decision. Now, there are still some buyers that it's very emotionally driven. And that's where it's important to know who you've got on the other end of either the line or the phone or et cetera. So when we move forward then to the close, knowing who we've got, if we've got somebody who wants to just cut to the chase, then don't overtalk it, right? Don't talk past a deal. We can do that in the selling, but we can absolutely do it even easier in the close. The other thing then, if you've got somebody who needs a little more certainty, give them that. Let them know, hey, I'm going to be here. I'm going to help you. This isn't just a one and done transaction for me. Really want to have that relationship. As we shift then to our more analytical folks, then it really becomes about showing them the data. We talk a lot about show me, don't tell me. It's great to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Now, put it on a contract, write every single person up every single time, particularly if you're in the close, got to do it in writing. So that really then speaks to that most analytical. But we do that across the board. And that follows that show me, don't tell me principle.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you're going through some of these. And as you were speaking, I was trying to take a few notes so that the listeners could kind of follow along. And you made some really good points, which I actually want to also emphasize. And I want to start with that first one about overselling. Depending upon the buyer's style, it's very easy to oversell, because if you tend to be that you buy yourself as someone who's slower to make decisions, needs more time, more touch point, wants to do research, and so forth, you're going to assume that your buyer is in the same position. But that's not so. You see, buyers come in 4 flavors, that 2, 4, 6, and 8. And that number 2 and the number 4 buyer are actually fairly quick at making up their minds. The number 2 especially, oh my God, it's so easy to, quote, oversell the 2. And
Mm-hmm.
what will happen is you lose the sale altogether.
Oh, absolutely.
This number 2 buyer, the D in desk, they don't want details. They don't want explanations. They don't want scientific evidence. They don't want you to go into detail. They want to know, what's it cost? When can we start? I mean, that's essentially all the information they need, because they're ready to go forward. It sounds, you're nodding, so it looks like you have some similar experience with the D.
Oh, definitely. Your high Ds, not only your high Ds, but your professional buyers, right? So individuals who actually know what they want, right? They're ready to make a decision. That's one of the key points, is they've actually got to be ready to make a decision. So when we're talking about our C's and S's or our 8s and 6s, that's really the biggest challenge. And if we see that, right, we think of objection handling typically selling, but objections in the close look a little different. So if we've got somebody who's not yet ready to decide, and we don't know that either because we haven't analyzed their personality to pick up on it, or we haven't asked great questions to source that out, then what we end up doing is we're pushing up against maybe another stated objection. But it's the unspoken objection, the fact that they're not ready to make a decision for whatever reason, and we haven't found it out yet, because if you're seeing this problem as a salesperson, it's on you, it's on me, then that's really what's happening. It's that unspoken objection. But it's an indecision, which is a decision, and it's to not move forward with you and your product.
So I want to address that number 6 and number 8 buyer, or the S and the C in desk, because especially that C, and you identified yourself as being high in S and C, correct?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, just to give my disc profile so people kind of are on the same footing, I'm a high I, high number 4. Secondarily, especially in my business, I am a number 2. And people may or may not realize that, because it's doctors there with a PhD, and people mistakenly think I'm a strong 8. Well, of course, I have to have some intelligence to have gotten my PhD, but that is not my decision-making style.
Right.
Now, personally, I slow down, but business-wise, I speed up. So you have to kind of know that when you're selling to me, okay?
Yeah.
So going back to our S and our C buyers, our C, they bolt if they feel any pressure at all. This is the person who has to make up their own mind. And what I always advise my clients to do when they're dealing with that number 8, the C buyer, not only are they going to take more time, and you need a drip campaign to stay in touch, and don't make it too quick, like every 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to send another, message to them and start a conversation, etc. But this is the person who you put any pressure at all, and they're going to flee, and they will never come back, even if they decided you were the best possibility to solve the problem. You see, it has to be their idea. They have to come to that conclusion. And the way you help them reach that conclusion, you ask great questions that paint the person into the position, the answer that you would like.
And that actually, it's interesting you say it that way, because I think that's then the difference between the approaches. And I love these points because it creates nice little opportunities to explore deeper. So what we would say from a 10X mindset, and it's not necessarily that it's disc driven or some other personality driven, but it's what's worked for Grant is always stay persistent, right? So oftentimes, particularly as a salesperson, right, we're taught don't put pressure on people. And there are some people, right? If you put too much pressure, you're going to blow them out and they will run off. That's for certain. But there's an appropriate place and a great use actually for putting pressure. Because if you've got somebody who is really sitting there just overanalyzing, but you could solve them, well, then you would put the pressure on, right? If you were the medical doctor and the patient was bleeding out and they were like, well, I don't know, maybe we'll put the tourniquet on. Sit back, be quiet, and put your leg out straight because here we're taking it, we're putting it on, right? So it's applying pressure to reach the proper solution. In doing so, we're analyzing and we're really working with that prospect to find out what's their real problem. So we call that the dominant buying solution. And when you identify that one issue, I don't want to bleed out from my leg and die, then I'm willing to put the tourniquet on, even though it's uncomfortable. And I'm willing to act more quickly to make a decision. But you're right in asking those great questions. And not that you're wrong in any sense, but where the approaches come back together is in asking those great questions, it becomes their idea, right? Bring it back to what's the pain point? What are we solving? And what's the outcome look like, right? If we were to increase your sales by 30% in the next 90 days, what would that actually do for you? What would it do in your business? What would it do for your family? Would your wife be happier when you come home? Would your husband be happier? Would your kids ask you what you did at work and you'd be able to say, be proud of your answer? Those things come out of some persistence. And so applying some pressure, I think it's a unique aspect of difference of an approach.
Yeah, I would suggest that our number 8 buyer, our C in disc, this is the person that, again, if you ask very good questions that help them think, that help them go deep and reflect into what they know, or maybe tease out what they don't know, they develop respect for you as an expert. You see, the number 8 buyer is looking for expertise. They're looking for problem solutions for sure. And they're not necessarily looking to please their spouse or make their children happy. They're looking for a kind of an intellectual satisfaction that they have been smart in figuring out a solution, and you're the solution. Hence, asking really astute questions, questions that get under the surface, questions that get even under that, is what's going to command the respect of the number 8 buyer. Now I'm going to switch to the number 6, because although the 6 is also slow and careful, they are doing a different sort of research than our number 8, because the kind of research that they're doing, Gary, is they want to have testimonials and references and satisfaction stories, people who are saying, I used the service and here are the results I got. And the reason for that is that they don't want to have unpredictability or take something they're risk adverse. So they're looking for stability and they're looking for a proven system. Has that again been your experience with the S buyer?
Definitely, right? So when we talk about testimonials, reviews, we typically just lump those in as social proof, right? So the larger concept there is social proof. And whether it's you walk into a restaurant and the person in front of you orders something and it comes out on the plate, and you're like, oh, what's that? I want that one. That is social proof. Particularly if it's something that you trust their opinion, right? If somebody is at a restaurant says, oh my gosh, this is delicious. Well, we're all sitting in the same type of restaurant for the same type of cuisine. It's likely that they at least somewhat know what would taste good or bad. So it creates great authority. For things that aren't as clear, like coaching, professional services, very technical, complex things that maybe the decision maker, business owner doesn't really understand all the technical components. Hopefully they have an expert inside, but most businesses are too small. They don't. So there, it's really up to us as a salesperson to deliver that proof to them. And the best way to do that is testimonials, reviews, or better yet, I said best, but there's even better than best, a referral, right? Because now you've really brought them through.
You said the magic word, because this number 6 buyer, the S, really feels safest when they have had a referral from a colleague, a family member, a friend, someone who can testify that, yes, I have either used the service, or again, in their network, they know someone who has, and hence they come across authentically with a strong message. Because the number 6 is looking for the reputation, the history, the stability of that service before they feel comfortable making up their minds.
Absolutely.
All
Spot
right.
on.
All right. So we've kind of talked about the slower decision makers, the ones that need a lot of nurturing. And again, I agree with Grant Cardone about persistence. You have to be pleasantly persistent, and
Yeah.
and that word pleasantly needs to be applied, because what is pleasant for the number 8 buyer isn't the same as the 6, and certainly not the same as the 4. So I kind of want to switch over now to our I, that person who really cares about people, because they are actually a fairly fast decision maker. They can often make up their mind in that first or second contact. But as I said earlier, this is the person that goes back later and reflects on and replays and thinks about and then torments themselves about whether they made a good decision. Now, tell me, in your experience, how you've been dealing with that I style.
Right. So in the close, it's about making sure that we don't talk past them. Right? We don't get too much into the weeds, because then we'll push them into analyzing when they really don't need to. Right. I need time to think on it. Well, thinking is instantaneous. What is it that you're thinking on? Right. So we can kind of get to the source and to the root thing. But if we're past that closing point and now they are thinking on it, and we term that what? Buyer's remorse. So if you've got somebody with buyer's remorse, look internally, right? Look in the mirror and say, could I have delivered the product sooner? Because the thing about buyer's remorse is they're excited when they close and they said yes. Something happened between the yes and that excitement and the tormenting. But if you just move them straight in and deliver quickly, then they get to the root of the product. And if your product's what you promised and it stands as it should, then they're going to still be excited.
Yeah.
So that's the best way, is just don't let it fester.
Yeah, I agree with you, which is why I recommend within 24 hours of a number 4 or high I buyer saying yes, you want to reconnect, and reconnect as personally as you can. In other words, sending some sort of automated email response is not the way to let that person get a sense of being personally valued, because
Right.
this is a person who's buying you, the seller. They're buying a relationship. And if there are other members of your team, introduce them to a VA or a partner, or who else might be helping you, because they want to feel like they're family. This is that client who's going to become a friend, whether you want one or you don't.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And one great tool to do that personal follow-up, and we've all got them with us at all times, use your phone and shoot a video. It takes a half a second, particularly if you have permission to text this client. And most likely you do. If you grabbed it on the front end and they've already purchased from you, it's really transactional, not marketing in nature. So do your due diligence on texting rules and laws, but chances are you can do it. And if not, put it in an email. And there's great tools to use.
And you probably know already, Gary, and my people who are listening to me, if you've ever had a one-to-one with me, you know that you can expect a card in the mail, and that card has been personalized with pictures, right? With photos, usually of you, because it ain't about me, it's about you.
Absolutely. And that's a key point too, is and I'm glad you mentioned that, make it about them, right? Hey, by the way, you had mentioned that it'd be really cool if we could do XYZ. Well, I went ahead and bundled that in for you, right? So I know sometimes we'll see individuals really like certain books, and if particularly if the author's around, they love to have it signed. Well, what a better thing than to have a signed copy of your favorite author?
There
So
you
that's a
go.
great add-in as well.
There you go. And so, last, we want to talk about the D. And as I mentioned to folks, that D makes up their mind in one, at most two contacts. Usually, that first contact, I advise my clients one and done. In other words, you need to ask for the sale the very first time you have a conversation. Now, you may or may not get a response, but that's okay, because this is the person who truly wants to move forward quickly. They don't like delays. When they decide to buy something, it's usually because they want it delivered yesterday and they want the results yesterday. Hence, they don't want to wait. And sending a proposal, oh my God, that's the kiss of death for a number two buyer. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think for the most part there, and one tweak I would say is we're always going for the close. So in just framing that out, I think sometimes we think on what is the close. The close is that we've got to have a signed contract and an onboarding. Well, depending on your product, that works. If you're selling a widget, then you might be able to sell it and deliver it and do it all right then. If you're, pop at the aisle, it's an impulse buy, right? It's a grab and go. But if you've got something that takes a little more work to set up or is a little more specialized, then what is that close? But we have to be 100% certain that we're moving for the close. And that keeps them moving through that process too. So when you've got a really high D, recognize the close may be their high D, but are they actually, in fact, the decision maker? Because if they're not, then the close is that they set you up with the decision maker. Maybe it's a three-way call for the next time. So that close can look a little different, but we're always shooting for something. And we really want to be clear on that on the front end versus find out halfway through that that's not what we thought we were showing up for today.
I loved what you just said, and I want to again highlight it for everyone. We're always shooting for something, because a close doesn't mean the person has said, yes, I'm buying your service. A close can be, yes, put me on your email list. Yes, send me, let's do a demo. Yes, to the next conversation. There are many ways that people can say yes that will move the process along. And each one of those is a little sale. It may not be a monetary sale, but you want those little milestone sales in order to get to the transactional sale, to get to the relationship building that goes on to have a customer for life, and perhaps, again, upsales and resales and referrals.
Absolutely.
Anything we haven't covered, Gary, that you think we should talk about in closing?
Circling back to our fours, our eyes, when they get a little uncertain, right? So that 24-hour check-in, I think that's a fabulous way to stay on top of that. Deliver your product as fast as possible, right? That's part of Amazon success, right? You order it, and the next thing you know, it's there, and you're like, oh, well, I guess I'll keep it. And it's really something maybe you didn't even need. So that speed of delivery is vital. But then the other component of that is looking for service touch points. So whether it's a 2, 4, 6, or 8, if somebody comes back with a complaint, that's an opportunity.
Yes.
Right? We want to look for problems. We're not looking to cause problems, but we want to look for them. Because one, we want to remedy the situation and leave a customer who's gotten the results and the outcomes that are promised and expected. But two, they may have just been on the wrong product, right? Oh man, that really didn't fill me up. I'm still hungry, right? I keep going back to food. It must be lunchtime. And, it's like, wow, okay. So the complaint is it wasn't a big enough meal. Well, the solution is, did you know that you can get extra sides and maybe a dessert? Now it leads to an upsell, and it stemmed from something else. So problems can be opportunities. Problems, in fact, are opportunities.
Yes.
And all businesses are in place to solve a problem. If it wasn't a problem, you wouldn't need to pay for the service.
Amen. Well, we've got just 60 seconds left to let people know again who you are, who I am, and how they can reach us.
Absolutely. So thank you for listening. I very much appreciate it. Coach Gary with Micu Growth, and you can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm tagged into this posting, or if you want to find me elsewhere, www.micu, the word growth.com. And you can go ahead, and I encourage you, sign up for my newsletter. So it's that website /newsletter.
Great. And again, if you don't know me, folks, Dr. Nancy Zare, the sales whisperer. I work with the consultant entrepreneur, that subject matter specialist who loves what they do and hates to market and sell. So it's the sales whisperer saying goodbye along with
Coach Gary.